Okay.
بسم الله والحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, we have two of our highly respected sheikhs with us today, Shaykh and Shaykh Saeed, here at SCI Phoenix, State Correctional Institution of Phoenix. And today, inshallah ta'ala, and in the future, we're going to talk about the legacy that these two men, amongst others, started in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections as far as establishing Islam. So welcome, my dear guests and sheikhs, Sheikhs Hood and Shaykh Saeed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like for you guys to introduce yourselves.
Hood Abdul Kabir. I'm almost 83, and I've been Muslim since 1972.
Let's control to all blocks and radius.
When you say Muslim, you mean during that time you came directly to the Sunnah?
Yes.
No Nation of Islam, anything?
Oh, no, always Sunnah.
Right.
Good question. Good, excellent question. They got to be known.
Right.
I'm going to run that by my part.
Yeah. And you want to, Shaykh, you want to tell the people about your name before you became Muslim? You know, what your name is and...
Okay, I was born Hugh Sinclair Williams, and I've been rolling with that name ever since I took Shahada, which was in 1972.
Right. Where are you from?
I'm from Philadelphia.
What part?
West Philly.
West Philly. So what neighborhood did you grow up in?
What neighborhood? Well, what we call the bottom. Down about 41st and Mansion.
Okay. What was it like back then?
Vicious.
Well, it was very, very calm compared to today. You got to remember, I was born before World War II. So when the war was over with, I was 4 or 5 years old, something like that. And I witnessed a lot of soldiers that had fought in the war come home and so forth. So I had first-hand knowledge of all my uncles and so forth, except one was in the military. And at that time, you got to remember, we're talking about the 40s now. We're not talking about today.
Right.
There were very few cars on the street, very few people. It was different. It was altogether a different world than what we see now.
Right.
Kids played on the sidewalk and so forth. We had curfew. We had a lot of things that were imposed on by our parents. You know, we couldn't run wild. You know, he had to be within earshot.
Right.
So when it came time to go in, you heard the mothers call your name out, and you better be within hearing distance, or you had a problem.
Right.
So it was a lot different than it is now. There were very few cars, very few telephones, no TV. We just had radio.
Right.
That was the going thing. See, so, and kids dressed a certain way. You could not wear certain things unless you were a certain age. I think, I would say, I couldn't wear a belt until about 8 or 9 years old because that was considered to be grown.
Wow.
I had to wear I had to wear what we call suspenders. When we went to school in short pants and so forth. We didn't wear long pants. Long pants was for Sunday or holidays.
Wow.
Other than that, you wore shorts.
Right.
And the little girls wore scarves, and they wore barbettes in their hair and all like that. See, so it's a lot different than it is now. So we came up under the old school, what we would call our old school, which would be our fathers and our grandfathers, aunties and things of that nature, that were that were like born and raised like right after, like maybe during not Civil War, but the First World War, something like that, around that time.
Right.
So we had a strict code. You know, kids were seen and not heard. It's that simple.
Right.
See, so it's different. I came up under a regiment, so we had discipline, we had manners, we had a protocol, and we although we were kids, we had our thing, but a kid was a kid.
How about the family structure back then? What did it consist of? Mainly.
Well, I have 3 brothers and 1 sister, and mom and pop. Now they fell out when I was about like 12 years old, but primarily I was raised in a dual family.
What about the neighborhood? Most kids grow up in a 2-family home in your neighborhood?
Mostly everybody that I know of had moms and dads. You know, there was very few people that didn't have a mom and dad.
What year did you start school, and what's the name of the school you went to?
I went to Belmont, 41st and Brown.
That's where you started elementary school.
Elementary, right.
What type of student were you in school?
I would say maybe a little bit above average. B, a little B, maybe B plus, something like that.
What subjects did you excel in, and why?
I was always mechanically inclined, and I love science. And so I was always tinkering with things here and there. And the only problem I had, like most people, I had a little trouble with math. I had a little trouble with math and so forth. But once I learned it, but it just took me a little while to really grasp what was going on.
What year did you start elementary school?
Oh, I guess 1946, I guess.
Wow.
Something around there.
1946.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't go to kindergarten. I went straight to 1st grade.
Right. So what high school did you go to?
I went to West Philly,
West Philly High School. What year did you start?
1955.
Okay. So was there a change in that part of Philly from the early 40s into the 50s? Because now we're talking about the World War II vets came in. Did the drug scene start picking up? The alcohol scene, or did it pretty much stay the same?
Oh no, that was foreign. No, we didn't have that when I was a kid.
No.
In fact, I remember a few occasions when I went out shopping with my mom or my dad or something like that. We would see a guy. He'd be like sitting slumped over, and the word was that he must be on drugs. That was it, or alcohol. That was it. And we would go around them. It was a thing where that was like a shameful type thing. See, so we didn't have that kind of problem.
Right.
See, I remember when I was younger, my dad used to take me to the beer garden and so forth. And well, he's showing me off because I was the oldest boy. And so he was, that's my son here and so forth, and all like that. And I hung out with him, like on the weekend particularly. But it's a marked difference between now and then. I mean, it's like night and day.
Right.
We had, as I got older, now you mentioned high school. When we got older, they had a curfew. If you were under 18, you had to be off the streets by 10 o'clock at night. And if you were and on the weekend to 12 o'clock. But at that time, there wasn't very many places kids could go. You either went to the movies, or we had a place, at that time we had Woodside Park, which is something like Coney Island, something like that. And we went to Carmen skating rink, and something like that. And maybe swimming, that's it. Kids didn't have very much to do.
Right.
We had chores.
Right.
We had chores to do. We had to take out the trash and the garbage, and we had to keep the streets clean and all that. We didn't have a lot of idle time. We had time to be kids, but we also had chores. We had responsibilities.
Right.
So particularly in summertime, we had gas lights on our block. We didn't have the electric lights they got now. We had gas lights. And when that gas light came on, it was time to be home. And you could hear it would come on, and then we would all break and come home. And after that, you went to bed.
Right.
And then, like, as I got older, running high school, like I said, we had to be off the street at 10 o'clock during the week.
Right.
So the only places that we could really go was like house parties, and they were over at like 11 o'clock, maybe 11:30, because we had to go to street by 12. So it wasn't very many places we could go, and wasn't that many things to do.
Right.
So we had a pretty structured life. It was comfortable. When I think about it, it wasn't bad at all.
Right.
You know, when you're a kid, you want to move around a little more. But as I look at it now, it was beautiful
Did you play
compared to what we
sports?
see now.
Excuse me. Did you play sports?
The only sport that I participated in on team level was I ran cross country.
Okay.
But I was too light to play football. I'm not tall. I can't play basketball. I couldn't play football. I was too light.
Right.
But and I can't really run fast. I can run long distance, but I can't run fast. And so I went ahead and I joined the team and ran cross country, which at that time was like basketball is now. Basketball was a good sport to play and watch, but for some reason in Philadelphia, cross country was really a sport.
Interesting. Wow.
And all the schools got together on Friday, and we ran around the 33rd and Ridge, the reservoir. We ran around that like one time, and that was a big thing.
So was it a lot of racism you experienced coming up?
Well, actually, when I was coming up, the neighborhoods were like white and black, you know, and slowly but surely they began to change from nearly all white to brown to, you know, like that.
So you grew up in an integrated neighborhood?
Yeah, all my schooling. When I went to Belmont, it was half white, half black. When I went to Salzburger Junior High, half white, half black. And when I went to West Philly, it was half white, half black. Except when we graduated, it was more black than white.
Because they started the...
Right, so they had so-called white flight.
Right. You started to see it.
Right, so we saw it all.
So you're talking about 1960? You started high school in 1955?
50, yeah.
So by the time you got to the late 50s, early 60s, you started to see the change in...
Well, I saw it in high school. From high school, you saw. Like I said, when I first went to West Philly, it was like half white, half black. By the time I graduated, it was like 3/4 black and 1/4 white.
Right.
So I saw all that.
Right.
And then we saw the changes of personnel. When I was younger, we saw the changes in like the trashmen. The trash guys used to, a lot of times they were white, they had black guys with them, but the white guys drove. They drove. And then we saw as the thing began to change, we saw more and more blacks driving. Then we saw, because the whites, what they had so-called white flight, they all left and went wherever they went.
Right.
So you look around there, all of a sudden all the mailmen were black, basically. All the trash men were white, all the garbage men were white, black rather. We saw all this thing, it was a gradual thing.
Right.
It's a gradual thing.
Sheikh Saeed, introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, my name is Saeed Abdul Alam. I took that name in 1971. I was born by the name of Robert Jordan. I was born in 1941 at Harlem Hospital in New York City. And I only lived there for about a year before we moved to Philadelphia.
So your family's originally from New York? Your
Yes.
mom and dad and something?
All of them.
Really?
All my brothers and sisters were born in New York, except my two youngest. And we moved to I'm talking about the old Harlem Hospital.
On
The
35th
one
Street?
now. This is the one in New York now, the new one.
Right.
It was old. I think it was on 133rd Street.
Right.
You know. But anyway, that's irrelevant. They didn't move me that much. But we moved to Philadelphia when I was 1 year old, and we moved to North Philly. We just only lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved to South Philly. A section called the Tasker or Grace Ferry area. That's around 28th and Tasker, all around there. Matter of fact, right where Tar is now. Anyway, move around there. My upbringing is completely different from his, because me growing up from my early teens, I was always in the streets, and I'm 81 years old now. I was born September 6, 1941. And most of my life I've been in jail. Most of it. I did 2 bits in Jersey. This bit right here I've been down for 52 years. I first went to jail in 1957. House of Correction. I first went to my first long bit was in Camp Hill. It was a juvenile joint back in 1959. I went there, stayed there for 19 months.
But Shaykh, before you get into that, tell us about your early childhood. When did you go to elementary school? And
Okay,
tell us,
this is all part of my early childhood, because I was 14, 15, 16 years old then. I started going to school in 1948, and it's an amazing thing, because I didn't know all this back then, but I look back on a lot of things now. See, I grew up with a lot of history. I don't want to make no racial thing out of it, but I grew up in a so-called environment where I seen a lot of history made in the United States. I was on the scene when the Brown versus Board of Education was found out in 1954, the whole civil rights movement. I was, because my family originally is from down south, down in Virginia, about 35 miles outside of Richmond. And my mother and father started sending me south, started about 1949, all the way to 1957 when I became in my middle teens, right? I began to be more independent of my family and whatnot. At that time, I began to get more wild in the streets and whatnot, and I was wanting to join the gangs. I was part of the gangs and whatnot.
What were some of the gangs in South Philly at the time?
At that time, I wasn't. By the time I moved to West Philly.
Okay.
I moved to West Philly in 1955, because the projects we grew up in South Philly, they tore it down. It was called the old Lee Island projects, and all that's around 33rd and Tasker, 33rd and Dixie. They tore it down. We moved to West Philly in 1955.
So you were about 14.
I was 14 years old, exactly. And the gang I was in back then was a gang called the Bobby Coats. It was around 57, Little, all around 60th Market, all around there, right? And I've been going to jail ever since then, because I did time in Jersey. I did 2 bits over there, and I maxed out over there in 1966. I first got locked up in Camden in 1962 for a robbery, and it gave me 5 years. But I did about 2 years, and at the time thing over there is different. But I want to say something about that early time. It's very, very important. Because when I first started going to jail, doing a real long time in Jersey, remember now I'm from Philadelphia. If I went to Jersey, I started meeting people from all over Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, Camden, and they were the first ones to just start turning me on to different types of things about life, about oppression, about slavery, things that were in vogue back then, right? Black power, all things that was in power at that time, back in the early 60s and whatnot. I met a lot of my mentors at that time came out of Newark, New Jersey, right? So the first time I left in I went home in 1963.
How old were you when you did your first bid?
Oh, I was 18 years old.
18.
Went to White Hills. It's called Camp Hill. It's called Camp Hill now. It's called White Hill. It was a juvenile joint back then. It's penitentiary now.
What was it like?
You had to be rough.
How was the penitentiary?
It had to be tough. Juvenile joints are way worse than adult penitentiary because the youth are brutal and don't have no, they ain't lived long to have no wisdom there.
Right.
You know, so they are real brutal. Back then it was much more outward, you know, rape and all the vicious things you see in jail. That's another whole story. So,
Right.
so I'm going to get to, because I'm sidetracked. But I want to say that when I first met a lot of these brothers out of Jersey, right, they were the first ones to turn me on too. Like, you know, different kinds of struggle in the world, different types of social aspects of life and whatnot. This is when I began to do a lot of reading, because I've always been an avid reader, right, my whole life. I've always been a person to learn. You ask her the question, well, a while ago, what was he good at school at? I've always loved politics. I've always loved science. I've always loved, natural things. I first heard of Islam in 1957. I didn't pay no mind.
So as kids, you really didn't.
No. No, because like Hood said earlier, I went to integrated school. I went to Orton Reed. Orton Reed, that's a junior high school in South Philly. And it was black and white. I'm going to tell you something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. When I went to elementary school down there, I went to James Alcorn Elementary School, which is right across from Orton Reed. I recall how they taught us. And a lot of people talk about slavery, history, then I lived a lot of that stuff. Because they taught us in school, give us the books about Little Black Sambo and Tar Baby and Living Bright Living Color. I've seen those, but I was too young to understand it. I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old then, right? But I something in me knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. Never no racism.
These was in the textbooks.
These are textbooks. These are books they handed out in school. This was an integrated school.
Right.
And they gave these books out to everybody. And I recall the pictures in the books of a little black tar baby running around a lion and turning the butter and all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? You remember them books, right?
Yeah, I remember.
And this they taught us in school. So this is the kind of environment I grew up in the late 19th. Remember, this is late 40s,
Right.
early 50s and whatnot.
Did
Right?
your dad, was he, or any of your family members, did they go fight in World War II?
No, my father, not that I know of, he didn't fight in the war. My father was always, he worked down Westinghouse. That was a big company out there in Chester, Pennsylvania, right? He was a forklift operator. And my mother, she was just a regular housewife, right? But
So you grew up in a two-parent home?
yes,
So the neighborhood that you lived in, most of the kids in the neighborhood had
everybody.
Basically, things were what we were called, the streets were there, but everything, it was still old-fashioned.
Still old-fashioned. The fights did the most, we had a little gun, but not the kind of firepower I had today.
Right.
And the dudes today, we had a thing called fair ones. You got there, you fight a guy one-on-one.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Right.
And knives were used more than guns back then.
Right.
And the respect the people had back then was monumental. Had respect. Blacks respected each other.
Right. So, what year did you start school? Elementary school?
Elementary school, I started about I was born in 41, so it had to be around about 1948, 49,
1948, 49. Right. And this is all in South Philly?
All in South Philly.
So what junior high school did you go to?
I went to Order Reed. Order Junior High. I went to James Alcorn Elementary School. Then I went to Order Reed. I went to the 9th grade. That's when we moved to West Philly. And the last grade, I went to 9th grade.
What school was that?
Saeed Junior High School. And then I went to West Philly High, same high school we went to. But I got kicked out in 1958.
1958.
I got kicked out from carrying a gun. Right? Well, it was a zip gun, but it was a gun.
Right.
So that's when I really started my street life. Right? Back in the 50s when I was in my teens and when I started going to jail.
So wait, before we talk about your incarceration, paint a picture for us of the street life back then as far as the gangs. What were some of the major gangs in Philadelphia?
Well, most of all parts of the city had major gangs. South Philly, they had Carpenter Street, 5th Street, 13th Street, the road, and I grew up down the road, right? North Philly had the Village, the Valley, they had the Tenderloin, they had Morocco, they had a lot of other gangs, Cyber Street, West Philly had the Black Bottom, where he grew up at, the top, like the coast, 60th Street, the Moon, places like that, right? The bars and all them from, yeah.
Right.
So, the gangs back then, they were vicious, but see, you gotta understand, the social structure done changed so much in the last 50, 55 years that you wouldn't recognize it, because Hood said something earlier about, when I got locked up, there wasn't no color TV, there wasn't no internet, there wasn't no technology, there wasn't nothing, there wasn't no cell phones.
Right.
There was no technology. When I first had a TV, my first color TV, I got that by 1985.
Wow. So when you got caught with the gun charge back in 1958,
Yeah,
were you incarcerated for that?
yeah. But see, back then, they didn't get the kind of time I gave to you. Juvenile.
Right.
I was juvenile. So I went to jail. I went to Dwight for 19 months. Let you out.
Right.
And you didn't have no long parole tails, and you didn't have to, they couldn't put you back in jail right away.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? My first bid was in the House of Correction. That was in 1957. At that time, there was drugs on the scene, but not like it is now. Well, I was smoking weed back in the 50s, drinking car syrup, things like that, right? So I knew about weed and cocaine and stuff like that, but not to the extent that they had today, right? Then everybody uses, everybody get high, right?
Right.
And as a matter of fact, the society addicts their people to drugs today, purposely, right, just to make money.
Right.
But back then, the major drug that was the worst drug of all was heroin.
Right.
Cocaine was only for like people who had the money to buy that, and that hadn't reached epidemic proportions like it do today.
Right.
And all that new stuff they got there, like fentanyl, all that stuff wasn't even heard of back then, right?
Right.
So I stayed high because I love to stay high. I smoked weed, man, since I was 14, 15 years old, and that's when I learned. I got into jazz a lot. I was a deep jazz African idol, right? So I used to go to the concerts and buy all the jazz collection, man, of some of the most rarest albums in the United States.
Really?
Billie Holiday stuff from 1933, all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? I was into all that, right? But that's sidetracking, right?
So, during this time, we're talking about the late 50s.
Yes.
So, you
Late 50s, early 60s.
Early 60s. So,
Yeah.
okay.
I said, well, I got locked up for my first bit in 1957. We beat up a school official, right, in Saeed Junior High School. They sent me to the House of Correction for 6 months. Then when I got out of there, we got locked up for some gang activity in Cowles Creek in 1959. That's when they took me, that's when they sent me to, that was my first bit. That was in 1959. I went to Camp Hill, or what we called the White Hill back then. It was the White Hill for 1959, and I got out in 1960.
So, what was it like, your first bid, being sent all the way out to Camp Hill? What kind of adjustment was that for you?
Well, it was it was an adjustment because it was my first bit.
Right.
And it was a rough joint. Because those juvenile joints back then, the two major juvenile joints back then was Glen Mills and Camp and White Hill, right? I went to White Hill because I was 17 years old, right? So I went there. I never really had I never had a problem in jail. I was like a little tough guy, like a little runner on the corners and all that. So plus I knew most of all the major gang leaders all across the city. Because I used to go all over the city, North, South, West, chasing the girls, getting high, things like that, drinking, things like that. The street life.
Right.
Remember I said earlier, I was in that street life for a long time. I was in that street life since I was 14 years old.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So I met a lot of guys who ran those gangs back then, you know, like Tall High. I didn't meet him, but I knew all his old heads and all that.
Right.
Since I know all them, I knew all his people.
Right.
You know, back then.
Right.
Even though I didn't meet him until 1975.
Right.
So, understanding jail back then is understanding a whole new, at the time there wasn't no rights. Nobody had no rights. The whole was the whole. These holes were there like penthouses. The whole back then was whole. They thought it was an empty cell, take your mattress off and that's it.
So what would it be like? No running water?
Holmberg didn't have no running water. You got your water, you got your hot water out the shower every night before you locked up, and they had a spigot in the cell that had cold water. So there wasn't no hot water. You had no laundry. Wash your own clothes and put them on paper under the bed. That's how they pressed them out. See, in other words, the jails were primitive.
Right.
When I first one of the early jails at the time, back in 1962, was a place called Moy Mess or Moco. That was on down South Philly. We watched movies. They had to put up sheets between the tiers for the screen.
Wow.
That's how primitive them joints was. You understand? One thing I be known was a lot of homosexuality back then. A lot of forced homosexuality. If you was weak and joints back then, you better have a problem. Because wasn't no pity, wasn't no mercy. Juvenile joints are always worse than adult joints because adults, they have a little more experience about life. Adults, youth, they just deal with pure brutality.
Right. So how do you view the youth now and the violence that's going on in Philadelphia? Is this anything new to you, or do you feel that it's a big difference from the time you grew up?
It's a nuclear distance between night and day. See,
Which way? How is it different now than?
Because of just the sheer animalistic brutality. See, when I was growing up, hood too, we were brutal, right? But we weren't sadistic. And there was certain kind of social rules you just abide by. You never kill nobody in front of their mother. You never kill children. You never kill women. These days, I'm going to use the term I don't want to use, but it's the only term I can use to try to describe what I'm talking about. These dudes are there animalistic.
Right.
Simple as that. These dudes are savages.
Right.
For real, I mean real savages.
Right.
You may not like to be called that because you take that slavery thing somewhere else, but these dudes are savages. You didn't do that stuff when I was growing up.
Right. So what would you, before we close out this session, what would you advise the youth, both of you, what would you advise the youth?
Okay. There's nothing can change the youth today except Islam.
Right.
The practice of Islam.
Right.
I don't mean just lip service because there's 1,000 of them out there. There's a lot of Muslims out there.
Right.
But they're doing the same thing the Catholics are doing.
Right.
They're doing the same thing that the unrestrained people are doing.
Right.
The only thing that can change the youth today is Islam that's being practiced in the correct Islam.
Right.
I'm gonna make something very, very plain to the people who we talking to. Me in the hood, right? There's nobody our age who didn't come up in the nation of Islam, the nation of Kufr, really, right? we bypassed that. And we went through hell in Graterford for 3 or 4 years. Because at that time, they were the dominant group in the jail, right? And they ran rush out over everybody. They was killing guys and whatnot. I mean, real killers and whatnot. And we were Sunni Muslims. And I was the imam at that time down there after I left, after I left Hood in them, right?
So, Shaykh Hood, could you tell me the next major transition in your life? So now we're about 1958, and I know the whole political scene is changing, demographics in South Philadelphia, in all urban areas
Right.
during that time. You're coming into your own now, you're 18 years old. So what was the next major transitions in your life?
Well, one of the things that I had to get used to was being grown. See, because before, you depended on your parents and so forth. But I started working and so forth, and I had to learn how to budget my money, how to pay my way. So that was a big and significant change in my life, because everything depended on myself as opposed to my parents and so forth. But it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. It was a natural transition that everybody was supposed to go through. I worked and I started getting laid off like a lot of other people, and I had to transition. Well, what do you do when you get laid off? You're paying your parents rent and so forth. Now you got to really budget your money and so forth. And I kept going back and forth with different little jobs and so forth until I went in the military. Now,
What year was this?
That was 1961.
1961.
And I stayed in the military for 4 years and 9 months. I went in the Air Force. And one of the reasons why I went was because my uncles had been in the Navy and the Army during World War II and Korea. The youngest uncle, he's about like maybe 9 years or so older than me. So anyway, I decided to go to the Air Force because it was something different. I said the Navy didn't enthuse me, and the Army, I know what to do with that. And I went
Did you have
to
to have good grades to get in the Air Force back then?
yeah, you had to take a test. At that time, the Air Force was kind of elitist, and that's not like it is now. You had to take a test,
Right.
and if you didn't pass that test, you didn't get inducted. So during the time that I was in the Air Force, I was really the only black guy in a lot of areas. So I went to school. I was the only black guy in the barracks of 72 in basic. When I graduated from basic, I went to tech school, become an aircraft mechanic. I was the only black guy in that outfit. Then when I transferred from
So where did you go?
Well, I was in, all this took place in Texas.
Texas.
Yeah, I was stationed, I went to Lackland first for basic, and then I went to Wichita Falls, Texas for schooling. Then I got transferred to my permanent base, which is Oklahoma.
So now you're talking about the early 60s.
Right.
You're in Texas. What was that like for you coming from Philly?
Oh, well, it was a huge wake up, because the racism that was prevalent in the North was subtle. In the South, it was outright. See, here we couldn't, or we weren't allowed to, or we weren't supposed to be in certain neighborhoods. I'll give you a good example. Now, a lot of the young guys right now that say they from Oak Lane, West Oak Lane, Germantown, Mount Airy, back in the day, brother, the only black folks that was in that area there were our mothers and our aunts and uncles and so forth that did days work. They did days work. They would be out there on the corner in the morning, and the cars would drive up, and they would pick who they want to go to their houses and help clean up. See, so guys now think that blacks always lived in the area. No, they didn't. They did not live in the area. You might have walked through there on the way to work or something like that, but you didn't hang out, and you better not be caught after a certain time of day, because that's the way it was.
Right.
Now in the South, you know, very segregated. You had your what you call the flats or across the tracks. That's where most people live. I think Chicago probably is about the best city in the North that will give you an idea. When they say the East Side, they mean the East Side. They're talking about all the East Side is predominantly black or brown, and the other side is predominantly white, whatever this might be. Now in the South, across the tracks meant that was the black side of town, or the flats, depending on where you live at, and depending on people in the South Carolina, it might be called the flats.
Right.
And Oklahoma might be called, you know, across the tracks. But it was usually always near train tracks, to tell you the truth. And I had to get used to not going certain places at certain times. I'll give you a good example now. Like I said, when I was in the barracks in Texas, I'm the only black guy. So there wasn't no place else to hang out but with the white guy. I had no problem with it, I went to school with white guys.
Right.
But when it came time to go to town, you know, they went their way and I had to go my way. See, because you can't be on the white side of town. And a lot of times, when say now Texas, and Oklahoma and Kansas and Missouri, they are on what you call Central Time. At 12 o'clock, the TV went off. That was it. Because people were farmers and so forth, or light industry.
Right.
Now what happened was, at 12 o'clock, all the white bars and clubs and all like that closed. So the white guys, they wanted some place to go. But on the black side of town, it was still jumping up and down.
Right.
So they want to come on there. So he said, no man, you can't come in this area. Why you feel as though you got the right to come over here? We can't go where you go.
Right.
Oh, we the same guy, we under the same flag, you know, blah, 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 all that kind of rap. And it was true.
Right.
But when you think about it, they were trying to get 2 bites of the apple, so to speak.
Right.
So little scuffles jump off every now and then.
So you remember seeing signs at the water fountain and bathrooms?
Oh yeah.
You remember seeing that stuff?
Oh, I lived it. I'm gonna tell you what happened. When I transferred from Lackland to Wichita Falls, there's something like maybe about 7, 8 bus loads of us. We all graduated from basic and we were going to tech school. And I can't remember, I think it might have been Midland, Texas. I think it was Midland, Texas. So we rolled up in the parking lot and the buses started unloading. And so when I got out the bus, I went to a restaurant or a hotel that they had rented, the Air Force had rented. So this was the pit stop. We were going to eat and so forth, rest up a little bit. So now when I get to the door, I look and I say, wow, I can't go in here. I'm in Texas. I realize where I'm at. So I leave and I go back and I sit in the bus. So one of the guys that his name was Tim, Dean rather, and another guy by the name of Tench. They lived in Coatesville. Well, Coatesville was where my mother and all my aunts and my family lived there. And I lived there for about a year myself. So anyway, they said, well, where you going out here by yourself? Come on and get something to eat. I said, man, I'm in Texas, man. I said, I can't go in there and got these white women there serving. I said, you think that's going to happen? He said, no, you can come in. I said, no, I'm not going to start no trouble.
Right.
So I'm sitting there, and so one of the sergeants came out, and he said, look, I understand your situation. He said, look, in here, in this little hotel, you're one of the gang. You're going to be served with no problem. He said, now I can't speak for what happens after that, but right in here you can. So I go in the little spot, I sit down, and I hear this little guy, girl come over me, what you want? And he served me. I said, yeah, it took me out because outside of that, wasn't nothing else happening.
Wow.
So I sat there and I ate and all that. I wasn't comfortable because, like I say, I'm like the flying ointment. and so forth. So when we got done, we decided, well, we're gonna go to this spot, across the street. There was a little grocery store or something like that. And we're gonna buy some magazines, 'cause we got a long way to go. So I could get some magazines and so forth. So I go in and start picking the magazines up, start looking at it, and the page, the guy that owned the spot, he told me, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm buying some magazines. I'm just going through to see what I want. So he tells me that if I pick it up, I got to buy it. I said, what? He said, yeah, you got to buy it. I said, well, what if I don't want to read it? He said, I'm telling you that you got to buy it to pick it up. So now I'm saying, what's going to happen next? Believe it or not, some of the guys that I was living in the barracks with kind of started with him. Because I'm looking around like, this guy going to move on me or something? And they were like, yeah, well, you got to follow the script. So now I got an attitude with them and him. I'm about ready to show up. I'm young, I done put on about 25 pounds, I'm in good shape. I can handle myself. These country boys can't handle me. That's what I'm thinking. So I said, nah, I better fall back. So I bought a few magazines and so forth, and we got on the bus and we rode. Then we went to the camp, and I signed in and so forth. Now here I am again, the only black guy in this situation. They put me in the room. We had a room where 3 guys could lock together. And the senior guy got the single bunk and by himself, and then 2 other guys got top and bottom. So I'm the last one here. I got top and bottom. 2 white guys, one from Iowa and one from Texas. And they didn't want me in there. And they let me know from the jump. They did not like me being, but I had to go there. So we went round and round about how we gonna clean the spot up and what we gonna do and all like that. And they were working. I hadn't been assigned or anything yet, so they would leave early in the morning or whatever time they had to go to work, because they work on the flight line. So, tell them when you're gonna go, when you're gonna come back. So we had a lot of little arguments about how we gonna clean the spot up and all like that. And got to a point where I had to show off a little bit. And I really didn't want to do it, but it happened. The tag was on the door, and whatever your name was, so mine's on the bottom because I'm the last guy there. So we had what's called a white glove inspection. About 5 in the morning, me and I dressed blues and everything, colonels coming through, and they wiping their fingers everywhere. We spent all night getting that spot ready, shine the floor and all that kind of stuff. So when it was over with, the door opened up, boom. Guy, he runs in there, and let's go to town, Brownie, let's go to town. So I said, oh, what are you doing? He said, he looked at me like, what are you talking about? I said, you didn't knock on the door. You open the door like you got a license to come in here. So I tell him, I said, you're supposed to knock on the door and ask, can you come in? He looked at me, yeah, yeah. So Brownie and the other guy, I can't think of his name, they looked at me all cockeyed, kind of like, what am I doing, telling and talking this way to them. So he didn't pay any attention. He walked right on by and just got the scuff on the floor. I spent all night long hand wiping this floor down with wax and all that to get it shiny so we could pass inspection. He's scuffing the floor all up, and I got attitude. Oh, what are you doing, man? You just, what are you doing? So he looked at me. He kind of big guy, about 6'2", about two something. So he looks at me like, you want to try me? And what he did, he made a funny move. He put his hand in his pocket, his back pocket, when he was talking. Well, I'm from the city. that's tantamount to a thump. We gonna rumble.
Right.
So he looked at me like, talking to me, head turned to the side. And I said, I got hurt this guy or what? So now I work on the flight line, we have a jackknife. And it just so happened that the jackknife that I had, it was like stripped wires and all that kind of stuff. It was like a Swiss knife, got 5 or 6 blades and all that kind of stuff. So I put it, it was in the drawer. So when he put his hand in his back pocket, started walking to me, I said, this dude, he gonna try to hurt me. So I go into the drawer, I pull out the knife, and I pull up, and I said, whoa, we can do this right now. I'm about this. And he looked at me, his eye got all big and everything. Oh, what's wrong? I said, let me tell you one thing. I said, I will hurt you, man. I said, I don't know who you think you're messing with. Oh, this guy's crazy, this guy's crazy. So it ended up, he said, we got to get out of here. So they ended up leaving. Now the word went all over the bags. I'm gonna hurt this guy and all this here. So Sergeant come to me and tell me he heard about it, and I better watch myself. So I'm saying, Sergeant, you know, is that a threat? I mean, you know, is that a threat or what? I'm just telling you, watch yourself. So these little episodes that I went through all the time.
Racism.
Yeah. It was very, very outward.
So what year did you get out of the?
Oh, I went in 61, and January of 61, and I mustered out in October 65.
So you was tap dancing with Vietnam?
I was supposed to go, but because I was short, my outfit left right after I left. When I was going home, they were going to Vietnam.
So you come back 66?
I come back, no, late 65.
Late 65.
Right.
So what was the climate like inside Philly? Also nationally, and where were you at as far as your mentality? Because now you're about 25.
Yeah. Well, I'm married now. I got a kid and one on the way.
Okay.
Now, when I come home,
So what year did you get married?
I got married, 63, 64.
Okay, so you got married in the Air Force.
Yeah. So now when I come back, I hadn't been home in about 2 or 3 years, you know. So now when I left, I didn't see what I saw when I came back. I happened to be on 52nd Street with my oldest brother, and I see all these guys slumped over. You know, I said, what's going on? He said, he laughed. He said, man, they drug addicts. I said, what? I wasn't down with drugs and all that kind of stuff. So he said, yeah, man, it's drugs. And I started looking around, and I started seeing, like it was dark. It was dark, but I came home in like October of 65. So now it's getting dark. It's dark. About 5 o'clock or so forth. I'm working and so forth. And I see all these people riding and stumbling, carrying on. And I see little young girls out there standing on the corner, which was strange to be out there at nighttime.
Right.
When I was a kid that age, it was home.
Right.
It's 6 o'clock at night, it's dark. And these little young girls, 12, 13 years old, they hanging out. I thought, well, this is really a stark difference than what before I left.
Right.
And I want to revert back to my tenure in the military. Now, like Saeed said before, when we grew up in the 50s. So we knew about Brown versus Board education. We knew about the in-the-till thing. We know all about that. And there was a lot of activity beginning to develop in the black neighborhoods because of those things.
Right.
People start coming out more. And when I was in the military, I got arrested in Georgia because I wanted to go up front to get some ice cream out of a Dairy Queen. They arrested me. And I was on leave with my roommate named Duncan. And the thing was, we were going to spend half our leave in Georgia and the other half in Philly, because he had never been north, and I had never really been deep south. I'm in the southwest, big difference.
Right.
So, we decided to, one night after we had gone to a little clubbing, we decided to go get some ice cream. And we pulled into a Dairy Queen, about like 11:30, something like that. So we go in the front, and they said, well, you got to go in the back. We go in the back, what you talking about? So,
Wow.
so while we were talking, we were trying to convince the two ladies that were in charge of the spot. No, you got to go in the back. He said, no, the law been passed. He said, we supposed to be able to go up front. So, next thing you know, here come police. They jump out the cars, shotguns in their hands, get against the wall, and all this kind of stuff. What's going on? So they arrested us, took us to the little city jail. And because we were military at that time, they got some air police that came from the air base there. So we got locked up, and then they cut us loose, and then we went to the air base. On the way, the guy, one of the airmen was saying, man, you guys in trouble now, man. We heard all what y'all was trying to do, and I'm like, well, what you hear? Well, I ain't gonna talk about, but you in Georgia, you gonna get this, that, and the other. So when we finally go on the base, we go into this office from this major. His face all broke up, red-haired guy, he tells us, sit on the floor. Sit on the floor? So he said, I said, I want to sit on the floor. He sat on the floor. He started talking about how he don't like what he heard, and he understands we all serve the same president and the flag and all that kind of stuff. But he don't like what he heard. So we said, I said, well, Major, what is it that we got arrested for? Nobody ever told us. All we know is this message. He said, well, I heard that you guys were propositioning those two white women. He said, propositioning white women? Said, all we trying to do is get some ice cream. We just came from clubbing. We took two fine young ladies to a little club, Elks Club, whatever it might have been. And all of a sudden, you talking about, we trying to proposition them old biddies. We like, 22, like that. And these women like in their 60s, like, talking about proposition. So he said, I don't like it. So we ended up being held for like a day or two, and then went to court. Well, when we went to court, we ended up beating the case. What it was, the women did not call the cops. There was a little young guy that was in the back. I thought I saw somebody moving in the back of it, but I wasn't sure. He got scared and he called the cops. And he told them, well, I thought they were going to start some trouble. So at the end of the day, we ended up going to court and beat the case. He said, yeah, so the judge said, look, let me tell you something. I don't necessarily agree with it, but the law says they have a right to be served up front. You got to observe the law. And he said, well, where are you from? I said, I'm from Philly. He said, it's not a very good look on us. He said, because our Southerners, we pride ourselves on Southern hospitality. He said, but it's not a good example. He said, look, I'm going to tell you right now, you guys, you cops and all that, don't bring no more cases like this for me. So that was one time. So we left. We said, okay.
So this helped form kind of a black nationalist type thinking in
right, because in the March of '63, I would have gone there if I could have got a leave, but they were booked up. Only some people could take a leave at one time. So, and rank has its privileges, and I tried my best to get a leave to go to Washington to join them, but I couldn't make it. And then I demonstrated some in the little town called Altus. Like 6 or 7 of us, we kind of like blazed the way. We decided one day we going to protest, and we sat in this we call it a little cafe. We call it a cafe. First of all, we out of order for being in that period. Now we sitting down on the counter and all like that, and people walking by looking.
Sit-ins.
Yeah, sit-in.
Right.
And we stayed there like about 8, about 12 o'clock that night. And brother, I never drank so much coffee, and ate so many donuts and stuff. We just decided to stay there. So finally, they closed the spot, and you know, and then we demonstrated a couple more times, you know, here and there in the spot. So I'm.
So when did you get into the Black Panther Party?
Well, actually, let me see. It was so much going on in the 60s. You got to remember. Well, you couldn't remember, but in the 60s, when they called it turbulent 60s, it was for real. It was so much energy on both sides, whites and blacks. You had the counterculture of the white guys wearing long hair. Right. They came out the hippie thing and went into the hippie thing.
Right.
Now back in the day when Saeed and I were in high school, they had what they call really like the birth of the cool. You remember Miles Davis had that piece called Birth of the Cool? The birth of the cool was everybody dressed nice, and they had like a laid back attitude. We kids now, we like 15, 16, 17 years old, but we acting grown. And everybody was that way. That's how everybody was that way. You know, like what's called Joe College type thing. Everybody was, you know, you wore your little cashmere, this if you could afford it, your little Stacey Adams shoes, your little lizards if you could buy, you know, everybody dressed nice.
Right.
Even in school, you know, everybody had a good appearance and so forth. Now, all of a sudden, in the 60s, you know, everybody has TVs now. So you can see things that you just read about.
Right.
Or heard about over the radio. Now, all of a sudden now, you're seeing groups like the RAM, Revolutionary Army, Black Liberation Army, Deacons for Justice, Panthers, and 1,000 other Black Liberation Army. Then you have the counterculture, the white guys, SDS, and some other groups. They're fighting against their parents,
right?
Because they don't want to go to the Vietnam War, and they don't like the culture that's happening with them. Blacks and browns are looking for a better day.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. You know, we want to vote. We want to be able to live where we got to live, and whatever. So a lot of energy is jumping off. The thing about the 50s is that we were very disciplined. So it wasn't hard to transition into a group and participate because we were used to doing things by the numbers, so to speak. Like Shaykh was saying, we had curfews and so forth. So when he said go home, it was time to go home.
Right.
And let's go here, we go there. There wasn't no vacillation at all. So my touching base with...
One second, Shaykh. 1 second. Excuse me. You go back over to...
next week, yeah. Still running?
Yes, sir, brother. We'll edit it.
Okay. Now I think he had a little more on this side here. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
So what year did you join the Black Panthers?
Well, I'll tell you,
68.
68.
somewhere around there?
68, 69.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
So now it's 68, 69. The landscape of Philly's changed. You got the heroin epidemic. You got the energy that's going on in the 60s.
Right.
So what was the main reason that you joined the Black Panthers?
Well, I like the program that they had. I think Saeed probably, because he was more closer to that group of people than I was, because I was always working and moving around a lot, but he had a different hookup. And what I liked about it was we were trying to do something. You know, like we call it the, well, I used to sell the papers, and all the papers that I couldn't sell, I bought. So that would contribute. And also, I like the free breakfast program that they had. We used to go around different spots and ask people, could they donate clothes? Could they donate food or whatever the case might be for the free breakfast program and so forth. So I'm group oriented. I'm not an individual. I'm group oriented. So fitting into a group is my group. Is my thing. I'm not, you know, like even like in sports. I always played team sports.
Right.
I never played single stuff.
Right. Individual sports.
Right. I'm a team player, so to speak. So what I liked about it was the fact that if you are gonna hurt me, you're gonna get hurt back.
Right.
See, all that shuffling and he and yes sir and all the tap dancing, that's not my style, never was. See, so that fit right in with my personality.
So who were some of your main influences?
My main influences?
During that era?
Oh, I don't know, other than my dad and my uncles and so forth, you know. Now, outside of my family.
Right, that's what I mean.
Outside of my family, let me see, we were talking about in the 60s. So who was jumping up and down then? Well, I kind of like what King was saying to a degree. You know, and I definitely love Malcolm. Definitely, I got to give him a shout out because he was more in tune to my personality. You know, he was a person that he spoke well, dressed well, acted well.
Right. And
he had a purpose, and everybody loved Malcolm. You know, if you had any substance about you, you had to love the man because he actually personified what a lot of people aspired to do and say, but didn't have the courage to do that. You know, he called a spade.
Right.
And we went off kind of, you know, that kind of stuff. And that's what I liked about him. I would say those are the two main things.
Right.
But when, in the 60s, so forth, there were competing schools of thought, so to speak, in the black neighborhood. You had the Panthers and other groups and so forth that were making their move. And then you had the Nation and so forth. And whichever way you went, that's where you went.
Those two main groups.
Yeah, I'm more about activity. I like being involved in struggle. I like doing things.
Community based.
Yeah.